Good morning and welcome to ICST Education. This is Govinda Karmakar. I am an educator and trainer of English and psychology and also fluency, communication, soft skills and interview etiquette. Now I am going to talk about personality. This is the second part of personality. The topic is personality development, and now I am discussing regarding socio-psychological theory. In the previous video I have already discussed psychoanalytic theory, and now our matter of discussion is socio-psychological theory. Socio-psychological personality theory recognizes the interdependence of the individual and society. The individual strives to meet the needs of the society, while society helps the individual to attain his goal. Out of this interaction, the personality of an individual is determined. Thus, the theory is not exclusively sociological, but rather a combination of two. The names associated with this theory are Adler, Horney, Fromm, and Sullivan. Socio-psychological theory differs from psychoanalytic in two respects. First, social variables and not the biological instincts are the important determinants in shaping personality. Second, behavioral motivation is conscious. Man knows his needs and wants, and his behavior is directed to meet these needs. The theorists accept that socio-psychological factors determine personality. However, there is no general agreement as to the relative importance of social variables. For example, Fromm emphasized the importance of social context, while Sullivan and Horney praised interpersonal behavior, and Adler employed different variables. Horney's model suggests that human behavior results from three predominant interpersonal orientation: complaint, aggressive, and detached. Complaint people are dependent on other people and move toward others. Aggressive people are motivated by the need for power and move against others. Detached people are self-sufficient and move away from others. Socio-psychological theory offers, to a very great extent, the answer to the problems of emergence of personality, particularly in terms of the influence of social factors is shaping personality. Social factors in shaping personality. The managers in the organizations can take clue from this theory in shaping the behavior of their employees. However, they cannot get a total picture of human behavior as determined by personality. Okay, next, trait theory. Now I am going to talk about trait theory. Trait factor theory presents a quantitative approach to the study of personality. This theory postulates that an individual personality is composed of definite predispositional attributes called traits. A trait may be defined as any distinguishable, relatively enduring way in which one individual differs from another. Thus, trait can be considered as individual variables. There are basically three assumptions of this theory. Number one, traits are common to many individuals and vary in absolute amounts between individuals. Number two, traits are relatively stable and exert fairly universal effects on behavior regardless of the environmental situation. Thus, a consistent functioning of personality variables is predictive of a wide variety of behaviors. Number three, traits can be inferred from the measurement of indication, measurement of behavioral indicators. The most widely trait theories come from the work of Allport and Kettle. Allport bases his theory on the distinction between common traits and personal dispositions. Common traits are used to compare people. He has identified six categories of values: religious, social, economic, political, aesthetic, and theoretical for comparative purpose. Besides the common traits, there are personal dispositions which are completely unique. These are cardinal, most pervasive, central, unique and limited in manner, and unique and limited in number, or secondary, peripheral. This uniqueness emphasizes the psychology of the individual that Allport has developed. Cattell has developed a smaller set of traits through the construction of tests and the determination of factors or trait families which may emerge from these psychological measures. However, he has taken a different approach from Allport. He has identified two categories of traits: surface traits and source traits. He determined 35 surface traits by finding cluster of traits that are correlated. They are 35 states. They are correlated. That's are correlated. For example, wise, foolish, affectionate, cold, sociable, seclusive, honest, dishonest, and so on. Such traits lie on the surface of the personality and are largely determined by the underlying source trait. He identified 12 source traits. Examples of such traits are affectothymia, that means good nature and truthfulness, versus schizothymia, critical and suspicious, that means ego, strength, maturity and realism, versus emotionally and neuroticism. Immaturity and evasiveness. Dominance versus submissiveness. Dominant versus submissiveness. Surgency, that means cheerfulness and energy, versus disurgency. Depressed and subdued feelings. Trait theory gives recognition to the continuity of personality. This theory is based on personality research. In this research, typical study attempts to find a relationship between set of personality variables and assorted behavior. This contributes personality traits to the behavioral science. However, this theory is very descriptive rather than analytical and is a long way from being comprehensive theory of personality. Okay, next I'm going to talk about self theory. The psychoanalytic, socio-psychological and trait theories of personality represent the more traditional approach to explaining the complex human personality. Self theory, also termed as organisms, organismic or field theory, emphasizes the totality and interrelatedness and also and all behaviors. This approach treats the organisms as a whole to a greater degree than do any of the other theoretical formulations. Though there are many contributors, notably Maslow, Herzberg, Levin, etc., the most important contribution comes from Carl Rogers. His self-theory of personality is very relevant and organizational behavior. He defines the self-concept as organized, consistent, conceptual, gestalt composed of perception of the I or me and the perception of the relationship of the I or me to others and the various aspects of life, together with the values attached to these perceptions. These are four factors in self-content. These are four factors in self-concept. Like number one, self-image. The self-image is the way one sees oneself. Every person has certain beliefs about who or what he is. Taken together, these beliefs are a person's self-image and identity. Erikson has defined identity as a lifelong development largely unconscious to the individual and his society. Its roots go back all the way to the first self-recognition. In the baby's earliest exchange of smiles, there is something of a self-realization coupled with a mutual recognition. Number two, ideal self. The ideal self denotes the way one would like to be. The ideal self differs from self-image in the fact that the self-image indicates the reality of a person as perceived by him, while ideal self indicates the ideal position as perceived by him. Thus, there may be a gap between these two characteristics. The ideal self is important in stimulus selectivity because a person will select those stimuli for processing which fit in with the characteristics of his ideal self. Number three, looking at self. Looking glass self. The looking glass self is the perception of a person about how others are perceiving his qualities and characteristics. This is the perception of others' perception. This is the perception of others' perception, that is the way one thinks people perceive about him and not the way people actually see him. The looking glass self is predominantly a social product which emerges from face to face interaction with others from the very beginning of the life. This interaction is directed towards cause about how others see him as an individual. Thus, beliefs about self are in large measure a reflection of others' perception about the person. Number 4. Real self. The real self is what one really is. The first three aspects of self-concept are the functions of individual perception, and they may be same as the real self or different from it. An individual's self-image is confirmed when other person's responses to him indicate their beliefs about who and what he corresponds with. In the face of feedback from the environment, the person re-evaluates himself and readjusts his self-image to be more consistent with the cues he was receiving. Thus, there is a mutual recognition of his real self, and the validity of his self-image is confirmed. A person's self-concept gives him a sense of meaningfulness and consistency. Though the average individual is not particularly well acquainted with himself, so to speak, he remains quite faithful to his not so accurate image of himself and thereby acquires some consistency. In analyzing organizational behavior, the self-concept plays a very significant role. A person perceives a situation depending upon his self-concept, which has a direct influence on his behavior. This implies that person with a different self-concept needs different types of managerial practices. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you very much.